My name is Ken Toko. I'm the Consul General here at the U.S. Consulate in Leipzig. And today I'm joined by
Mi Lei, I'm a journalist.
We're celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the United States. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about our various experiences, my experience as an Asian American in the US, and Ni's experience as an Asian German in Germany.
Yeah.
So welcome to our consulate.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and I'm so excited to talk about our Asian identities and celebrating this month. I'd like to know what it means to you being Asian American, being Japanese American. What is that like to you?
You know, I grew up in America. I was born in America. My parents immigrated from Japan. But I was born in New York City. I grew up in New Jersey. And for a long time when I was a kid, I really had an identity crisis. I didn't really know what I was, whether I was American, whether I was Japanese, or what was I? I didn't know. There were many times when I asked my parents what I was. And eventually I realized I can be both. I can be Japanese American. It took me a while to come to that realization that it's okay to be both. I don't have to just identify myself with one or the other.
I also think of myself as a hyphen German, a Viet German, Vietnamese German. Being Vietnamese East German, especially with this very specific history of Vietnamese people in East, or like now Mitteldeutschland.
So, can you tell me a little bit more about the history, I guess, about your own history? You know, I arrived here last summer, so I've been here about 10 months now. And, you know, I've noticed, obviously, that there are a lot of Vietnamese Germans, or people originally from Vietnam here, especially in Leipzig. So how did your parents end up here, and why is there such a large Vietnamese community here?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you. You're right. Whenever you're here in Leipzig or in any other bigger East Mitteldeutsch, like Middle German city, you will see a lot of Vietnamese business restaurants, or maybe little bodegas, or shops where they sell gifts and clothes. And that is because there was a contract between the former GDR and North Vietnam. Both countries were like socialist countries and called each other Bruderstaaten, like brother states. And in the 70s, the former GDR established contracts with a lot of those states to hire workforces from those countries. And there was also a contract between former GDR and Vietnam. And starting in the 80s, a lot of Vietnamese people came here to work in factories and also to study. And then in the 80s, late 80s, there was the Mauerfall, the reunification of Germany. And of course, this was a huge change to everybody here in Germany, and also a huge change to the Vietnamese people that came here. The reason why there are still so many people here, or Vietnamese people here, is because there was the risk of getting deported. So the only chance to stay here was opening up businesses. And my parents also came to Chemnitz actually in the 80s to study and to work. So that is the story behind the Vietnamese people, the many Vietnamese people here in the Mitteldeutsch and Middle German Bundesländer countries. I really want to hear about your upbringing in New Jersey.
Yeah, so in the area where I grew up in New Jersey, as I mentioned before, I mean, at the time, back in the 80s, there were a lot of Japanese people, enough so that there were restaurants and stores, supermarkets, Japanese supermarkets, and Japanese weekend schools. And so there was a fairly large community there at the time. And now when I go back, the towns where I grew up, where I hung out as a kid, there are more Koreans now in those areas. The demographics have certainly changed in that area. You know, the area where I grew up in New Jersey, it's very multicultural. I mean, as you know, New York is very multicultural.
I think when I read that you were born in New York and that you grew up in New Jersey, I thought that's so cool, because that's really something that I always wanted for myself, just growing up in a more diverse setting, or maybe even in a bigger place than a small town in Thuringia. What I liked about being in the US was always that I had the feeling I could also be an Asian American at some point, or I wasn't too othered, and that I could also be a part of all of this, and that's what I really like.
In the US, I mean, I've been told, a couple times that I speak English so well, like I commented, people commenting on that, I'm like, thank you very much.
How did
Or
you
like,
react to that?
well, I just sort of like laugh at it. Or, I do get the question sometimes, where are you from?
Yeah.
Right? I get that a lot.
Yeah.
And in the US also, but in the US, I can't really figure out whether they're asking, where are you from in the US or where are you from? Like,
Yeah.
And for me, sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out. And so I just say, well, I'm from the New York, New Jersey area.
Yeah.
And then I watch their reaction and see like if that was the answer that they wanted or if they were looking for something else. And sometimes they'll be like, okay, and then and are you like a Japanese heritage or something, And that's fine. But like, I mean, it's much worse when you're overseas. When I was in China, for example, I got that question a lot.
Yeah.
Like, where are you from? Because I am Asian, and they can't figure out what I am, and they're like, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from the U.S. They're like, no, where are you from? I'm from the U.S. No, where are you from? And then like, it would turn into this argument about where I'm from,
Yeah.
and then eventually, I know that what they want to ask. I know what they're getting at, and so eventually, I'll give them the answer that they want. I'll say, okay, I'm Japanese American. And they'll be like, oh, you're Japanese, okay.
Yeah.
So that explains it. And so I think this concept of Asians being American also is not, I don't know, I mean, there's ways to go, especially overseas, for people to sort of accept that concept.
Yeah.
And obviously people who've been to the US, who visited the US, and especially multicultural places like New York, they see that Americans are, not just like one type of person. I mean, you have a whole variety and diversity of people. But I think in many countries where the population is homogeneous, where pretty much 95% of the people look the same, that concept of multiculturalism or diversity might be a little bit more. It might take a little more time for them to really understand that and accept that.
Yeah.
And certainly, I think that's really what makes the United States unique, is that it's truly multicultural.
It is. Well, I think it's not just a cliche, because being othered here in Germany and also here in Eastern Germany, that's a big part of my Asian identity, actually, because it's not only when they ask, where do you come from, it's when they keep asking, where do you really come from? And I really come from Germany, but of course it's not what they want to hear. So this has always been a big part of my life. And of course this happens in any kind of place, but I have the feeling that it happened less when I was in the States.
The question of where are you from, I think it's something that also my kids experience a lot, and they've asked me a number of times. Dad, when they ask us where we're from, like, what should we say? I'm like, because having grown up in a diplomatic family, I have 4 kids, only one of them was born in the US, one was born in Taiwan, and 2 of them were born in China. And, but they're also American, obviously, but they have Japanese roots and Japanese heritage. And when they get asked the question, where are they from, they sometimes don't know how to answer that. And I tell them, you can just say you're a Japanese American.
Yeah.
And hopefully people will understand. But
yeah.
Again, it's sometimes difficult to explain that personal history, especially when you've lived in so many different places.
Yeah. For me, experiencing racism is unfortunately also a big part about Asian identity, and especially since the beginning of the pandemic, especially East and Southeast Asians experienced a lot of racism, being blamed for the pandemic, and there was a rise in like anti-Asian racism in the U.S. this hashtag Stop Asian Hate. So how did you experience all of that?
It's been horrible. It's been horrible watching all the news about all the anti-Asian, not only comments that people make, but also just the physical violence that people have experienced. Especially older
Yeah.
Asians, a lot of women also
Yeah.
have been attacked. In places like New York, that I grew up in New York, and I wouldn't have imagined
Yeah.
that in a multicultural place like that, there would be such racist attacks. One thing that I'm really sad to see is that, this is coming out so much. I thought that we had gotten past all that.
Yeah.
Obviously with Black Lives Matter also, there are so many issues right now in American society with race and discrimination and all that. And a lot of it did come out over the past year. I'm glad to see that, it's great that President Biden has taken such a strong position on this and has come out so strongly against this sort of anti-Asian racism and hatred. Well, what's even more inspiring for me is to see the rising tide of voices from the Asian community in the U.S., particularly among the younger generation, saying, enough is enough. We're not going to take this anymore, and we have to, stand up for ourselves and stand up for our rights and stand up for, stand against hatred and racism. How do you see the sort of phenomenon that we're seeing in the U.S. here from the German perspective?
Pandemic-related anti-Asian racism was definitely a big problem, or is a big problem here in Germany too. I think maybe you've heard of this hashtag I'm not a virus. There was also a lot of solidarity with Atlanta, for example, solidarity with the Asian elders that were attacked, because we all know that the mechanisms behind it, it could happen to us as well. I find some comfort in resilience as well, in people organizing and people doing community projects, and I'm really grateful for that as well.
This pandemic, I think, has really shown that our society is resilient, and that people can come together to try to overcome this huge challenge. But it's also brought out some negative aspects, and a lot of negative aspects of society too, but positive and negative. But again, I think, going back to what you said about how people are speaking up about this and seeing that in the US, it really gives me hope, right? Especially seeing the younger generation really stand up. A lot of young Asians getting together and congregating. That gives me hope.
Yeah.
That gives me hope that, maybe we can turn the tide on this. That we just need to keep going with that. We need to continue to be vocal about it. And when we see things that are wrong, we have to address it. We have to call it out for what it is. It's really up to all of us as individuals to do that.
Yeah.
It was great chatting with you about all this. I think we covered a lot of issues, and I think this is again just the start to a discussion. We'll definitely have to continue this sort of discussion, and I'd love to catch up with you again at some point to see how things are developing, how things have changed. And hopefully we'll be able to meet without masks next time.
I really do hope so. Thanks so much for having me.